went to the Met Museum here in New York. On Friday night, there was a panel discussion about fashion. The moderator was Andrew Bevan, who is a fashion writer and producer. The people that were talking were Greg Foley, who's a creative director of Visionaire magazine, Phil O, who's a street style photographer for Vogue.com, and Shelley Fox, who is the Donna Karen Professor of Fashion at Parsons School of Design at the New School. The overall conversation was pretty, not serious, which is good. I like, because fashion's just not serious. And Greg Foley said one thing that kind of summed up the whole panel discussion. It was something like the word fashion and the word important should never be in the same sentence. He said that was some kind of a quote. I Googled it, but haven't found any information on this being a real quote. But anyway, I thought it was fitting of the panel discussion. It wasn't very serious, and I think that's nice when people keep fashion not serious. Some of the things they talked about, first they kind of all introduced themselves and talked about themselves a little bit. The main conversation through the panel discussion were things like, they talked a lot about street style, because Phil O is a street style photographer and he's done that for years. Kind of talking about how people nowadays, especially with social media, there's a lot more what they call peacocking on the streets, especially in places like New York City, where people get dressed up because they either want to be photographed or they know they are going to be photographed, and they dress up way more than they would have 10 years earlier, because people on the street, they were going to take your photo any second of any day that you had to be ready for. So they were kind of talking about looking back 10 years and what did people wear. They weren't as dressed up. Their wardrobe wasn't as curated or as eye-catching. They kind of talked about that people are tired of other people peacocking, because it just gets tiring to watch people try so hard to get pictures taken of themselves. They also talk about authenticity of personal style, kind of like, what is authenticity? What does that really mean? And does it even really matter? And how social media and the internet in general has really homogenized style, because everyone now can go on Instagram and you can be inspired by something on the other side of the world in 2 seconds. And so the whole world, the whole trends and everything are a lot less segregated than they used to be because of the internet and because of social media. So I think that was something that people feel like is maybe not as interesting. Like, for example, when you go travel now, you can go from Shanghai to New York and you can see people dressing similarly. You can find trends that are happening at the same time in both places, which 10, 20 years ago you probably wouldn't have seen. So everything's just a little bit more blended now wherever you go in the world. Shelley said that she went to London. Everything she saw, she was like, oh, I could get that in New York. I can get this in New York. That's in New York. She couldn't find anything that was unique to London that she needed to purchase and bring back to New York. She kind of talked about how it's a little bit harder to be original, to find those fashion pieces that are original, because, well, you have the big shops like H&M and Zara, and there's stores all over the world. So everybody has access to those stores, but there's also e-commerce. So even tiny e-commerce stores, a lot of them ship almost anywhere in the world as well. So even teeny tiny niche brands have access to many different countries and cultures. So it's just harder to find those unique pieces that you can't find anywhere else. Because of e-commerce, you can find everything everywhere, basically. And then they also were talking about young designers having this obsession with having a personal brand. Basically, everybody wants to start their own brand, which I get. That's how I was when I was in school. Before I went to school, I wanted to have my own fashion brand as well. So I get that. But they were kind of talking about how the young people need to slow down and realize that working for someone else for a few years maybe isn't a bad thing. And then they kind of joked about starting an anti-brand. Anyway, it was an interesting panel discussion, nothing very serious, which I like.